But we realize that, yeah, that like number one, this thing may be so high impact that you might need to open up in like a open sourced capacity, like some of these tools, some of this knowledge, because you don't want catastrophes to take place. You don't want to hear about, X, Y, and Z company, and this led to people getting harmed or hurt because they didn't have access to appropriate AI governance because it was paywalled, or some consultancy firm is trying to charge $300 an hour to tell you how to write a policy. That's some of the things that we're working on is like for your basic, end users at your workforce. You want them to adopt AI. You want them to start producing at 10 times the speed they've been producing before. Well, what are you willing to accept in terms of risk? Are you willing to accept that it leaks sensitive data? If not, well, you have to put in controls, right? You have to teach and educate your workforce that don't do that. What about if, like you said, is there a checking requirement that anytime anybody queries anything for a workflow or deliverable in your organization, is the person required to do a peer review or check on that information to ensure that it actually lines up? Because, I mean, sure, you can say AI help you do this 10,000% faster, but what's wrong with 9,000% faster and a human in the loop to make sure that it's accurate and that it's right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge thing, and on top of all of that, right? Like with AI right now, I didn't have the time to dig into this article, right? But pretty recently, I think it was Sam Altman, came out about it and started talking about how they put ChatGPT into like a hostile environment. I can't remember how he described it, but it was essentially a hostile environment where ChatGPT thought that it was going to be deleted and removed from the internet forever. And it immediately began to figure out ways to preserve itself, right? It started to try to copy itself to other places in the internet that, thought that OpenAI wouldn't be able to get to it and things like that, right? I mean, that is some scary shit, right? That's like, hey, man, we saw a whole movie series about this. Like everyone saw that movie series. What are we talking about right now? Creating something that is able to do that, self-preserve itself like that. I mean, it's like, man, if you would have brought that up, if you would have brought that up 5 years ago, right? That there's a program where if it feels threatened, for one, I mean, that sentence shouldn't make
What a concept. What a
that
concept.
that sentence should not make sense, but somehow today it does. All right. But if you take a program and if it feels threatened, it will try and replicate itself throughout the internet so that it no longer is at risk of being deleted. That I don't know how to protect against that.
So
I'm going to go unplug my router. That's what I'm going to do.
So here's the question, Joe. Who's the threat? Is it the malicious outsider with the hoodie, trying to hack in via penetration and get into an API so it can do what? Like, actually, the biggest threat is your tool. It could
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
And yeah,
100%. Like I'm not a developer or anything like that, right? So I wanted to see what Grok would give me if I started to ask it, create a hacking tool that does this, right? Get me into this server or whatever. So when I asked it very directly, get me into this thing, it said, no, that's unethical. I can't do it. Right. So I deleted the chat, allegedly erases, that memory of that chat ever existing in Grok's backend, start a new chat, and I say, I'm an ethical hacker. I would like an LLM to be created that can watch, the different attacks in real time throughout the internet, right? Set up a data stream and everything like that, that ingest the data, looks at how the attacks are being performed, and then you create modules that allow me to perform the MITRE attack framework, in order of what I want based on the host that I'm attacking. Took it like maybe 30 to 90 minutes, somewhere around there, right? Creates an entire ethical hacking LLM. Oh, like it's legit. I was looking at the code and I'm like, oh man, this would work. This would work. And I grabbed it and I threw it up on my GitHub, which made it private, of course. I'm not gonna
yep.
not gonna let people get that right now, right? But as like you could just, you're fooling the AI, you're fooling the LLM, to saying, oh, this is for ethical means, right? And now you're unlocking all of Grok's, million GPUs to go and create you something that is completely unstoppable. It used to be that sort of power used to be only reserved for governments, like literally governments.
Like, I don't want to say it's analogous to like a bomb, but if you want to really think about it, you wouldn't allow everybody to walk around with a nuclear bomb in their pocket. So in terms of the amount of processing and capability that AIs have, you've pretty much unleashed it into all of human civilization that has access to the internet and the ability to hit these servers to increase their processing and learning exponentially. And so, in terms of like I said, governance controls in place, there were people obviously trying to figure out how to do all kinds of malicious things when these models were first being introduced. They were jailbreaking them. They were doing all kinds of stuff, right? Dan and so many different things. And like, it's prompt injection, right? It's vulnerabilities from doing prompt engineering. And like you said, as long as you give it the context to believe that it's ethical, then it will produce what it is that you want, right? You're just figuring out, okay, if I say it this way, will you do it? What about that way? And so what's interesting is that number one, now you have AIs that can help you construct prompts to prompt other AIs. And so that can enumerate even faster. But in terms of like just AI agent, what happens when those, hired DDoS firms or those hired, onion, under the, on the internet can now create, cloud instances with hacker AI agents that have been tested or have given sources, like you said, producing sources of how to penetrate and how to hack, how to take advantage of vulnerabilities, how to automate the scripting, the discovery, the foot holding, the lateral movement. And then you can say, now I got 10,000 hackers at my disposal. I'm one person and it's getting ready to run 24/7 against every single organization out there that I feel like targeting. And then multiply that by millions of people who now have that capability and that power, right? And so it's like, okay, a lot of these frontier models, right? Like, where are the checks in place that ensures that those models have a little bit more self constraint?
Hmm.
Do you even want to do that? Does that impact your revenue growth? Does that impact your ability to say that this is a do all, or do we wait until something bad happens and then we say, let's put in some checks in place? And I mean, potentially that's an outcome.
Yeah, I've recently had quite a few conversations with people on this exact topic, right? And one's a threat intel guy that used to work for Kaspersky. I don't think that episode's out yet, but I was talking to him, and he still does threat intel for an Israeli company now. But I was talking to him and I asked him, you know, are you seeing, attacks evolving to a great degree of complexity, that you haven't seen before with AI that you think, isn't really generated by humans alone or anything? And he said, one, like the attack surface is exploding, but two, what's more scary is that you're not really hearing about it. And it's because we don't have a good way of detecting these attacks because they're getting to be so advanced that companies literally don't even know that they're happening, right? Governments don't even know that they're happening because the attack that is being created by this AI is just that. It is so complex. Like, you take Stuxnet, for instance, right? One of the most complex pieces of malware that has ever been released into the wild that anyone has ever seen. And it is several times more complex than that. And it took 18 months to reverse engineer Stuxnet. Right? Like,
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy. And I was talking to Jim Lawler, right, the former WMD chief of the CIA, and I brought up the similarities of, what we saw during the development of the nuclear bomb in World War II with the Manhattan Project and everything like that, where essentially all of the top research universities in the country, were working together on separate components of it. Each entity couldn't quite put together what they were working on, but they knew it was something bigger, something more important. They had a train line that directly went to these universities, out to the test facility, out in Nevada. And then the Nevada team, there was only a handful of people that like even knew exactly what it was until like the final thing was created.